I really appreciate everybody joining tonight. My name is Laura Jackson. I'm the volunteer manager at AHC. I appreciate y'all joining, and I'm sorry that we're not doing this in person, so I can't say hi to you individually and welcome you, but appreciate that you're here. We're going to have some quick staff introductions and then go into a great presentation by Sarah about positive youth development. We're going to have breakout rooms where you will be on camera talking to the staff at your center. But for now, you can be on mute and you can have your screens on or off. That doesn't matter to me at this point. I am recording this first part of the session, so just wanted everybody to know that as well. So again, thank you for coming. And first, I would like to ask Millie to join me on screen and she can introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Millie. I use she, her pronouns. If you started as a volunteer in the last few months, I know you because I helped match you to your site. If you did not, then I likely haven't met you yet, but I look forward to meeting you at some point in the next, who knows how long. But I am AHC's new volunteer coordinator, new as of, I don't know, 8 weeks ago-ish. But I'll be assisting Laura in getting our awesome volunteer team trained, recruited, sustained, supported, and I'm here to help you however I can. So thank you for being here tonight, and I'm happy to be virtually meeting you.
Thanks, Millie. The other thing I wanted to do before we jump into Sarah's presentation is just talk a little bit about AHC's response to the incoming administration and possible changes with immigration. It's something that is probably on many of your minds, certainly on our residents' minds, and it's very much on our minds. So we are, AHC has put together, well, whatever, we're joined a task force of local organizations that are looking at resources that will be available to residents, resources, information. So we're going to be gathering that. We have an internal working group that will be getting that out to all of the on the ground staff, our resident engagement specialists, to make sure that they are able to support our residents. And then some of what we'll talk about tonight will help you if any of your students are expressing their anxiety or concerns or questions to you. So, so we are in the information gathering stage, ready to be supportive. And oh, I guess there is one specific thing that our staff are doing. There's a Know Your Rights tenants knowing their rights training next week that all of our RES staff will be attending. So we'll gather some specific information with that. Okay, so now I will turn this over to Sarah to introduce herself and share a great presentation.
Thank you, Laura. Hello, volunteers. My name is Sarah. You might have seen me, a couple of you at the sites. I've gone and done site visits, so a couple of you may recognize me, but for those who do not, my name is Sarah Dollinger. I am the program manager for youth development at AHC. And I'm very excited to share this with you. Positive youth development is a framework and a strategy that I've worked with for the last almost 10 years, which is like scary to say. So I think it's going to be a very informative presentation, but one that will also hopefully bring a lot of practicality. So rather than being very, theoretical, my perspective on this and what I thought would be most beneficial for everyone here is how do we apply it? How do we take something that is very theoretical and make it practical for our needs and the needs of our community? And as Laura said, this is becoming a time in which a lot of youth are very anxious, very concerned. There's a lot of unknowns, and that can lead to different changes in behavior and things that we need to be aware of. And so a lot of the tips and tricks, if you will, that I'll be sharing during this presentation will help you connect with your students. For those volunteers who are mostly ASP, I still think that this presentation will be very helpful talking through like early adolescence and puberty. So a lot of, you know, 5th, 6th graders will have a lot aligned with this as well. Millie and Laura are going to be doing me the favor of monitoring the chat. So during the presentation, at any time, you can always put a question, a comment, or concern in the chat. And if there's time to address it in that moment, I will. And if not, there are spaces in my presentation for questions. And because I'm going to go through things in like different stages to give people time to sit, digest, and think about things. So we're going to do a lot of the information in the beginning and then the breakout rooms towards the end. And so, all right, I will get started. So our agenda is we're going to do a little icebreaker, and then we're going to talk about the youth brain and the science behind what's happening during puberty, and this transition between childhood to early adolescence to adolescent to teen, and what those phases look like. An introduction to positive youth development, and then practical methods to include positive youth development. And during that time as well is when we're going to be doing our breakout rooms. And then there's going to be, at the end, a little bit of final tips and takeaways as well. So we're going to do a fun little icebreaker. This is a Mentimeter, which some of you may not be aware of. This is going to be, it's a little technological, but it's a little bit, it's fun because it's interactive. If you're on your computer, it's very simple. With your phone, look at the QR, scan the QR code, and you're able to put in 5 answers. So you can put in up to 5 different answers of what do you remember most about being a teenager. If you are on a computer, you can go to Mentimeter or Menti, MENTI.com, and just put in the code. And I will drop that in the chat for everyone as well. And the code is 792. And I will put mine in as well if you see me looking down. Okay. All right, we're having some technical difficulties on PowerPoint side, but it's all right. We can work through it because I have it live here. So I'm seeing a lot of live action. So this is Friends is larger because a couple people have said Friends. Academic stress, planning for my future, curious, family stress. I'm seeing a lot of stress, emotions, unsure, chorus. Okay. Busyness, very busy, hanging with friends, playing sports, angst. Angst is a good word. We always describe teenage times as teenage angst. Awkward, anxiety, activism, studious, silly, shy. Yeah. Popularity. Popularity becomes a very important and big part of our society. Scott, I see your message. It's okay. This is just a fun little thing. If you're unable to use the Menti site, you can always just type your responses into the chat. And the question again is, what do you remember most about being a teenager? I'm actually surprised I don't see it. But for me, it's like acne. Like I remember having bad acne and having to deal with that. That was no fun. Boy crazy. Yes. Hormones are rushing. That time period. Yeah. Lots of hobbies, friends. Yeah. So it looks like friends, school, and then a lot about anxiety, angst, awkward. So getting into like the emotional part. And we're going to talk a lot about emotion. But hopefully, yeah, when we think about being a teenager, we do think back now in positive terms, but also probably when we were going through it, we wouldn't have used positive terms because it is not an easy time for anyone. For the parents who have to, parent the teenagers, for the teachers who are teaching them, and then for the teenagers who are living through it. It is not the most fun time in the moment. So thank you for that. I'm going to take this away for now. It was supposed to populate on PowerPoint, but I will figure that technological thing out a little later. So we're going to start talking about the youth brain and what is happening in the development of every young adult and what's happening. So just to be clear on some terms, when I say teen and youth and young adult, they can all mean different things. And so a lot of the more rigid, more technical definitions is early adolescence is 10 to 14, adolescence is 15 to 19, and then young adulthood is anywhere like 18 to 24. So youth is a larger umbrella term that includes early adolescence, adolescence, and youth, and early adulthood. So it's a large age span. If you think about what's happening and all of the changes in a person's body and life from the ages of 10 to 25, those are 15 years of drastic change. You are going from figuring out who you are, finding your own self, independence, to many children at 18 go to university, live on their own, start their own lives. Some are even mothers and parents themselves. So it's a time of rapid growth and change, and one that we need to be aware of what's going on as well. This is one of my favorite graphics. When we talk about a teenage brain, there's a lot going on. I will say the memory for chores and homework is probably accurate. It is the smallest itty little bit, and there's a lot more of other things going on. The hormones are ramping up. You're trying to understand who you are. You're being rebellious. You're figuring out your own independence. There's a lot about, your self-image, your self-worth, body image. Everything comes into play. And especially now that we have social media, we're having a lot of other influences. But a teenage brain, as we know from science, is developing. It's somewhat hardening. It's very soft, but it's hardening, and we're creating connections between the left and right hemispheres. But the prefrontal cortex, which is the small white box on this graphic, is showing the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain that is involved with decision making, future thinking, and risk tolerance or aversion. And so you can see it starts on the left with a 5-year-old. It's still one of the least developed areas. Preteen, teen, and then 20-year-olds, it's still one of the last areas of the brain to develop, which is why we continuously say that a brain is not fully developed till the age of 25. And that is one of the last sections. So a lot of our logical mind, there's a logical mind, a feeling mind, and different aspects of that. But in reality, the ability to make decisions and think through consequences is very difficult for teens. And some of that is societal and pressures, and it's new. And part of it is actually brain. Like your actual brain is not able to fully comprehend some of these things. So as we are maturing and getting older, we get better at it, but it's still a skill. Decision making is a skill that we're working through and learning, but it's very important to realize what's going on in the brain. So I have prepped a couple of videos just so I don't talk at you for this entire presentation. So we'll start with this video from UNICEF.
We used to think the shaping of brain wiring systems tapered off after early childhood, but neuroscience tells us the brain goes through another rapid phase of change from age 9 to 14, a second window of opportunity. Early adolescence is a crucial period for brain development, where many challenges begin to emerge. It is also a time of opportunity, when rapid changes can be harnessed to set adolescents on a positive path. Puberty initiates intense hormonal changes when the brain is forming better and faster connections between systems, improving the ability to make decisions, solve problems, understand consequences, and to gain more control over emotions and behavior. At the same time, the adolescent brain goes through a period of greater sensitivity to social evaluation and emotional reactions. Increased sensation seeking, interest in social relationships, and exploration of identity all begin to emerge. Early adolescence brings on broadening experiences, acquisition of new skills, and formation of social networks that will have lasting impacts for the rest of a young person's life. To learn more, download the new publication, The Adolescent Brain, a second window of opportunity on the
So this is the second window of opportunity is a report that came out about UNICEF about the adolescent brain and the transition and what we can do given this time period. So this is a screenshot from the report that talks about early adolescence. So that window between 9 and 14 being the time in which puberty is beginning. So hormones are increasing at a very high rate, and how that affects brain development, but how it's also a time in which we can start to set habits that can either positively or negatively affect youth. And some of it is societal pressure, some of it is biological. So there's all these different factors, but we can think about the long-term effects and how we can set youth and teens in particular up for success, not just academic success, but social, emotional success, relationship building between others. And so it's a very important time. So there's, of course, the biological factors of what's going on in the brain, the hormones, the neurons, the connections. There's a lot of things going on. When we say population, I like to think that this is instead of population, but more societal. You know, what is going on in the world around not just them, but the greater sphere that has influence. So as Laura mentioned, a very large shift in the world is happening on Monday with inauguration, and it's going to bring in a lot of changes, and that's going to bring a very big shift into a lot of teens' lives, and it's going to be something that we have to recognize that is going to affect them. And then, of course, there's also just the social need. We've all known that like friends are some of the biggest indicators of how a kid is going to end up. If you are friends with, you know, the troublemakers, you're most likely going to end up in situations that are going to end up getting you in trouble. If you're really good friends with the very high performing academics, that's probably a really good thing for your GPA. But we can't always plan teens or our children's friendships. So moving forward, like how can we discuss social identity structures and like create healthy areas in which youth can participate. So this was not in the video, but this is from the full report. But it's taught, and I like this example of spirals. So from a positive spiral, it talks about biology, talking about, you know, starting to consider risk aversion, to more responsibility, to increased confidence. These are good things because you can talk about these things. Environment, puberty, you stay up later. Then your social interactions change because you're groggy in the morning. But it can also lead to problematic behaviors in school and at home. So there's ways that we can adjust things, but we need to be aware of what's triggering it, what's really going on. And I will fully admit I am not a brain scientist. So I do have another video that I would like to show you that talks a little bit more about the nitty gritty. It's not so scientific that it's not attainable, but it's about 4 minutes. And I think it will shed even more light into what's going on in the adolescent brain during this time period.
The adolescent period is absolutely amazing. People often give it a negative approach, saying, oh, it's a time where adolescents are going to lose their mind, or they're just immature, or raging hormones drive them crazy. These are all not only wrong, but they're myths that mislead us and actually disempower us. Whether we're adults or adolescents, they actually give us the wrong message, and they make it so there's nothing we can do. So what is actually the truth? The truth is that instead of raging hormones, what's happening is we have remodeling in the brain in ways we never could have predicted. We now understand two big things are happening in the brain, things you as an adult can support adolescents in developing well. And if you're an adolescent, you actually can use this to help your brain grow in an optimal way. What are those two things? The brain is pruning itself. So imagine that in childhood, you're growing like a tree and establishing all these branches and all these leaves are growing. In the brain, that means connections among the basic cell, the neuron, called synapses, are being established, and you're soaking in the knowledge of the world, and that's beautiful. The tree is just growing, growing, growing. But then what happens, that surprised everyone, is the brain begins to prune itself. You start carving away some of those leaves, some of the smaller branches, even some of the larger branches. And the reason for the pruning is to specialize the brain. While the child is developing in ways that are really generalized, learning everything they can about everything they can, an adolescent is going to begin to find their passion, to actually find things they like, things they really love doing, and to drive their development in that way. So pruning is actually a use it or lose it principle underneath it. That if you don't use something, you're going to lose it. So if you like sports or like dancing or like music, do those things so you continue to establish those circuits. The second thing that happens in the remodeling adolescent brain is myelin formation. Myelin is a healthy sheath that allows connected neurons to communicate with each other in a much more effective way. How? It's 100 times faster, the signal that's sent down a neuron to communicate with another neuron, 100 times faster, and after it fires off, it's 30 times shorter the resting period that happens. 30 times 100 is 3,000. So when you put down myelin, you made your neurons communicate 3,000 times more effectively. That's a great thing. Now, the great thing, too, is that you as an adolescent can actually use the focus of your attention to be aware of your emotions, aware of other people, to be engaging in activities, to be doing things with your thoughts that actually reinforce the parts of your brain you want to hold on to. So the good news about the remodeling story is that a field called neuroplasticity, how the brain responds to experience, shows us that what you do with your mind can change the activity and therefore the structure of your brain. So if you then come up with the statement that the ultimate goal of brain remodeling is to make an integrated brain, to differentiate areas, that's the pruning, and myelinate them, that's the linkage. When you increase differentiation and linkage, you make the brain more integrated. And an integrated brain is the pathway toward well-being. And you can do mind-sight exercises. These are exercises that increase insight, empathy, and integration. And if you do them as an adolescent, and you can also do them as an adult, you'll actually increase the integration of your brain as your brain is growing, not just during adolescence, but throughout the lifespan. And what's the outcome of integration? When integration is made visible, it's kindness and compassion. And so what we see through adolescent development is that our relationships become built on connections that are deep and filled with honoring each other's vulnerability, that's kindness, and supporting connections that are compassionate, filled with a sense of caring about other people and wanting to help them. This is the kind of world we can build as we move through life and support each other in our development.
So pretty interesting, yeah? We think about brain development, but I really liked in the second video how it was so extremely positive. It wasn't as if we're starting from scratch. We're pruning and we're remodeling, we're improving. we're continuing to learn. But for those of us who work with adolescents youth, we can definitely see that focus on specialization. It's really when personality starts to come into play, and their passions become so important. And we're definitely going to touch on passions and the importance of integrating and working within the not the confines, but the defined passions of youth as a way for motivation, because that's extremely important going forward. So again, the brain is under construction. It's not a solid thing. It's a process. Different youth are developing at different rates. So it's not a simple thing to say, oh, all 13-year-olds are like this. All 17-year-olds are like this. The processes will be fluid and change throughout any person's life. I don't know. Okay. And so now I'm going to get into practical or the theoretical side. So positive youth development. Positive youth development is a framework that was created by the United States Agency for International Development. In terms of framework, it is young at a nice 25 years. So it's been around for a while. There's still a lot of data and proof that this is a framework and a strategy that works, but it's a younger framework, I would say. And this is the most important aspect. It's a little bit blurry, but I tried to get it as large as possible so that it would be better to be seen, but I'm going to be going through the sections verbally. So it has 4 different areas of focus. And the main goal, which is in the head area, is healthy, productive, and engaged youth. So to start off, it starts with assets. So this is training, formal education, interpersonal skills, higher order thinking skills, recognizing emotions, self-control, and academic achievement. These are all assets, things that we can train for, improve on, and very easily measure. So it's a very important section. And then there's agency, where we have positive identity, self-efficacy, ability to plan ahead for goal setting, perseverance, positive beliefs about the future. And contribution. Contribution is one thing, youth engagement, and it is the most important thing. And it's also one of the hardest to do, as we'll discuss a little bit later. And then the enabling environment. What we're really trying to create is a very positive enabling environment. And one of the reasons I'm so happy that all of you are here for this training is that it is adding to a positive enabling environment for youth, because enabling environment is talking about bonding, opportunities for social involvement, support, pro-social norms, values and recognition, youth responsive services, gender responsive services, youth-friendly laws and policies, gender responsive policies, and physical and psychological safety. So as an organization at AHC, we are very committed in having youth-friendly policies, also for creating a physically and emotionally safe environment. And you all as volunteers are part of that support system. So people who are working with youth. And so you see enabling environment at the bottom in blue, but there's also that blue ring around all of it, because all of this, the agency, the assets, and the contribution happen within the enabling environment. So enabling environment is one of the key and biggest factors, and one that we do have some control over. Some other areas not as much. So this is the basic framework, and it talks a lot about emotion, self-control, recognition, positive self-identity, and there's a lot of correlations and realities that lead to other outcomes. But this is the framework that I really wanted to share with you all, because it's going to be the basis of where I start talking about tips and tricks and how to interact and create more of a positive environment that's youth friendly. And when I say youth friendly, I mean that youth play a part and not one that is diminished by being token or not truly active. They have an active and beneficial role in their own decision making. But we'll get into that a little bit later. And so following, this is not positive youth development. This is another theory by Lerner, his last name was Lerner, about what can come out of positive youth spending, what are the outcomes that we expect. And these are what we're really trying to work on as an organization, is, you know, creating confidence, building character, having a caring environment, having youth contribute, affecting their competencies, building up their competencies so they are able to contribute and be enacted, and connection, not only just but for mental health as well. This is extremely important. So structured belonging. So youth engagement isn't about, and I love this quote in the middle, isn't about fixing behavior. It's about building and nurturing, so that we can have productive relationships that help support youth, or youth growing from a young teen into a hopefully productive, happy, healthy adult. So I wanted to share that with you. I'm trying to get to the methods, because this is where I want to spend the majority of my time. So I'm going to skip that last slide. I don't know where that came from, but we're gonna. So as I mentioned before, when we're talking about youth engagement in an enabling environment, this is Hart's ladder of participation for youth. So he has a theory that talks about levels, essentially, of youth participation. And I liked this graphic, and it shows it in particular because 1, 2, and 3 are in green. And actually, this is the one time we don't want to be in the green, because usually we associate green with happy and good. In this case, for this graphic, green's not so good. It's when we manipulate youth. So we kind of rope them in to do what we want just to be shown. Same with decoration. You are invited to an event to be seen, but not to be heard. And so participation for shows is along the same lines. They have little or no influence. And so we can see as we go up the ladder, youth have more and more opportunity to participate, to voice their opinions, to express what they need, want, or feel. And so the goal is to be towards the 6, 7, or 8 level. I know that within AHC program, there may not be the flexibility to, you know, just let the youth do whatever they want, because probably it means they'll just be on their phone instead of doing tutoring. So there are moments where it's like, no, we have to set boundaries and standards and talk about this, but it's also a time in which we can see, it's like, are we giving youth decision-making power? And I think what's going to be very important for creating bonds and a sense of safety and security, especially during this very uncertain time, is giving options. Okay, you don't have any homework. We can do this or this. Both are leading towards a positive outcome. It's like, okay, let's not just play on our phones, but we can do something else. But I'll get into this, because youth are all about emotions. I will say there are moments in which your feeling brain and your logic brain, I will say they are constantly at ends, because how you're feeling will always determine how you react to something. If you, for example, didn't sleep well last night, you're probably gonna be a little bit more short-tempered. You're tired, you're exhausted, and this is an adult. I'm able to vocalize and logic my way through that. It's like, oh, I know I'm tired. I know I'm not in a good mood. I might not want to have a tough meeting today because this happened. A lot of youth don't have the words to really express themselves and how they're feeling, or really understand the impact of how their emotions are affecting their day-to-day life at all hours. And youth are emotional beings. I thought I put that in. Guess I didn't. I had a feelings wheel. I guess it didn't get into the presentation. But the feelings wheel is a image that I will share with all of the RESs at the sites that can then share, and with Laura, so you can share it with the volunteers, which is just a graphic that expresses emotions, but talks about how, anger can be described with 8 different words. And a lot of times using more vocabulary to be more expressive, it's like, are you really angry? Are you frustrated? Or are you pissed off? Like let's classify, clarify, to really get at things, to really express it. But especially when we are afraid or fearful, parts of our brains do start to shut down. It's usually the logical and decision making, which is the opposite of actually what we want. When we're afraid, we would like to think that, okay, we're going to be logical and make good decisions and go through, a mental checklist of what I should be doing. But no, it's like, I'm afraid. I'm scared. That means I'm going into my emotional side of the brain, which is usually very reactive. And we can see this a lot with young teens. They get spooked at times, and it's, fight or flight, but a lot of it's, they get in your face. They're like, oh my God, and they get really loud and big, but it's a protective mechanism. And so knowing that youth are extremely emotional, usually at all times, and really how they feel and what's going on behind the scenes before they enter program can really help us give them grace, but also support them through the process of recognizing their own emotions so that they can emotionally regulate, and then make better decisions on their own. And so I'm going to give you a menu of options, or a menu of strategies that you can use when working with youths. And what's very important about this, and I call it a menu for a very specific reason. It is not a list. It is not an order. You do not have to go through one by one and say, oh, I have to do all of these to help a youth mentally regulate or bond or help in a situation. These are just 8 options of what you could do. And so when we go into the breakout rooms, these are the 8 different strategies I want you all to think about. What do you think would be most useful in the situation or scenario that I gave? And there's no right or wrong answer, but we'll get through these. And so get personal, but not too personal. So a lot of times it's really helpful to be like, I've gone through this, you'll go through this too. Sometimes that can come off very patronizing. Sometimes it can just lead to someone talking more about themselves and really focusing on what's going on with the youth and what they're going through. So I think it's important to say, it's like, yeah, you broke up with your boyfriend. Yeah, that's hard. I've been there too. It's really rough. And a lot of times, unless they're asking you a direct question, try to speak less about yourself and ask more about them. And so I gave a very specific example, but, so you're talking to someone you're mentoring. When I was in 9th grade, I had a really hard time with math. I stayed once a week with my teacher and did homework in their classroom to ask questions if I need to. Could that arrangement work for you? Why or why not? So it's not saying what you should do. It's just, hey, have you thought about this option? It worked for me, but also not going into a lot of details and specifics is important. Embrace, I don't know. I think we can all admit we've had adults in our lives who, even if they didn't know everything, projected that they knew everything. And it wasn't always fun to go to them for help because you felt lesser. So when you say, I don't know, it allows you to model how to handle when you are uncertain of something. So it is a process that adults do. We don't know things and we go find an answer. We go figure it out. But it can allow for connection and be like, it's okay. I don't know either. We're going to figure this out together. And so the specific example I gave here is like, I don't know the answer to your question. Why don't we look for the answer together? Do you want to search? This is again, I'm trying to model and give examples. It's like where, again, I'm giving a youth two options and they get to pick, which can be very empowering. Do you want to search together, or do you want to look separately, and then after a couple minutes we can both share what we found on this topic, and just see what they say. And avoid the dreaded, and I should have underlined dreaded because it's a big one. Dreaded but and should. But will completely negate the previous statement. Your outfit is cute, but why did you pair it with those shoes? Is actually a sentence like you think like, oh, I gave them a compliment. I complimented their outfit, but you said but. So it's like, something you don't want to hear is coming after but. It's like, in our, work lives, so, if you're a supervisor, it's like, I really like what you did, but you're like, ooh, yeah. And we have a tendency to use the word but a lot in our conversations with youth, because it's like we're trying to make them feel good about something, but we want to change it. We want to improve something or make a comment. But a lot of times if you use the word but emotionally, which is why I have the picture of the wall, an emotional wall goes up. You're like, ah, dang it. Like, it's like they don't even, youth in general don't remember that you just said anything positive because you said but and then gave any form of criticism. Criticism is very hindering to emotional connection. And should allows a lot of judgment to come in. So you should do your homework to get good grades. Doesn't seem like a very harsh statement. But it's like, okay, I should do this, but I don't. Does that mean I shouldn't get good grades? That I'm not smart? That I'm not intelligent? Like, these negative emotional thought process spiral begins very quickly after the word should comes out of someone's mouth. I think we can all remember a time in which most likely our mothers or fathers, but mostly mothers, have told us you should do something. And we can all roll our eyes and go, oh my God. It was not fun. It's like, thanks for telling me what to do again. And we have those visceral reactions. I have those directly from my own childhood. My mother telling me like, oh, you should do this, you should do that. And it's like, oh my God, Mom, really? Why do you have to keep telling me what to do? I can make my own decisions. And being a teen or an adolescent, you want to start making your own decisions. And when someone says you should do something, you're like, oh, great, again. And so if we try to avoid but and should, we can start having better conversations. And even me just saying avoid those two words, I'm going to push you to think about it the next time you're having a conversation with one of the teens, and notice how often do you say but or should. And I promise you, it's more than you think. I wrote this slide and thought about it, and it's like, I still do it too all the time. And I know better, but it's still like, oh, it's just so easy because we're all in the habit of it. And anxiety. Anxiety in general is a much bigger topic. I could probably talk for an entire hour and a half just about anxiety, the effects of anxiety, and how to manage all of the different connections between anxiety and behavior. But that can be another training if we are so inclined. But anxiety can manifest in many ways. Some of it will be by age, by gender, by culture. But a lot of it is you can hyper focus, you have the inability to focus. Things you usually enjoy, you normally don't anymore. We all know this physical reactions that we have when we're anxious. We don't sleep as well. And when you don't sleep as well, nothing really starts to go in a positive direction. It's a lot towards the negative. And also we know that, you feel emotions in your body, and in anxiety, for the majority of people, and myself included, when I get anxious, I feel it in my stomach, like that rock, that knot, that eating feeling of something in your stomach. And that in your stomach and your gut is so integrated and important to your own health, mental and physical. So when your stomach doesn't feel good, it can lead to a lot of concern and worry and stress. But it can also, anxiety in general allows us to start spiraling. We start thinking one negative thought, and then it's like a snowball going downhill. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's like, oh my God. And the biggest thing that you can do in general is breathe. Because when we are anxious and scared and nervous, we have a tendency to not fully take a deep breath. And so it can help if you can label the feeling, like, are you feeling anxious? Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. I, again, will share the information about the feelings wheel to have better vocabulary around feelings, but also interruptions. You've been talking a lot. Do you want to take a sip of water? By taking a sip of water, you have to stop enough to take a sip, and usually you take a breath after. You always swallow. Interrupting with senses is very helpful when someone's feeling super anxious, or the ability to focus on little things. It's like, oh, do you smell that? Or to smell something, you have to breathe through your nose. Is another like trick if someone's really feeling super stressed about something. Drinking water. If someone's going through a very anxious period, like bordering on a panic attack, it is also helpful to look at very specific things. Like I am in my office, which I have decorated with little colorful things here. Oh, now we have good light. What? Oh, okay. Anyways, be like, oh, look at that very yellow ball. Like, do you see that? Oh, that's cool. Okay, can you just look over at that thing? Focus on that and take a brief breath with me. Usually if someone's going through a very difficult period, humans will mimic others, especially those around them. So if you even take a deep breath, consciously or unconsciously, when you're having a conversation with someone else will usually copy you. It's kind of like the yawns are contagious. Take a deep breath. Someone else will be like, oh yeah, and can do it with you. You can either, if we're having a very intense moment, of course, if you feel like help, of course, reach out to the RES at the site, but also you can help someone with breathing. Just say, okay, let's take three deep breaths and rethink this. Do we come up with any new ideas? Oh, there's my feelings wheel. I just didn't get, I thought I put it at the beginning. So when I was talking about recognizing emotions and having words to describe them, let's see, let's pick a good color. Orange. I'm going to pick orange as my example. And this is, scared. A lot of time we feel scared. To be honest, I am scared about what's going to happen next week. I don't know about many things that are not happening, but how am I really feeling? Scared's a bigger umbrella term. Is it frightened, intimidated, worried, overwhelmed, not enough? Like there's a lot more that we can unpack if we use different vocabulary and have that available. This is a image that I will share with Laura, and if you all would like to have it for yourself, you're more than welcome to use it. Also, you can Google feeling wheels and come up with lots of options. This is actually a smaller version of the full one. And if you follow Brene Brown, she talks about the feeling wheel and opposite feelings a lot. So, but yeah, so this is the feelings wheel with lots of different words and about how we truly feel. And it's a lot because it also, teens feel a lot. A lot of times they'll be like, I'm so cool. It's fine. Like everything's good. And come up with this confidence, but deep down, there's so many feelings because a lot of things are new. Life's changing, life's hard. And sometimes not having the right words can make it more difficult to get the help or the support that they need during difficult times. So using physicality to your advantage. When we think about a teacher or we think about especially getting in trouble or being berated, a lot of times there's very specific images. When I even said them to myself, very prominent images came up in my head. And one of them was when I got in trouble when I was a teenager and my parents yelled at me. And I was sitting on the sofa, you know, shoulders hunched, hands together, going, yes, mom, oh, yep, yeah, dad, I know I screwed up, I know I did. But, you know, they're standing above me. And teachers, you know, usually students are sitting, teachers are standing. It's a power dynamic. And so if we are at the same eye level, that can bring a little bit, there's always going to be a power dynamic no matter what we say. Because especially if we're a mentor, if we're tutoring the student, we are teaching them, helping them, and you know, we come from a base of experience, knowledge, have degrees, all of these things, and they're students, they're young, they're learning. So there's always going to be a power imbalance, but if we're standing up above them, that can be a hindrance to connection. So especially sitting at the same eye level and mimicking their body language if possible. You know, we probably just don't need to like lounge and slouch in a chair like they have a tendency to, but also not being as formal at times. Being able to connect with them will allow better conversations. You know, if they're extremely anxious and stressed, sometimes youth will go into smaller spaces that they feel safer in, like corners or smaller like rooms, because big areas can be overwhelming. And just recognizing that at a lot of our sites, there may not be the option to go to a smaller, more private, quiet area. But if at all, go to a corner, separate, especially if you're having a very emotionally charged or intimate conversation. And by intimate, I mean talking about emotions and things that maybe we don't want other youth in the program hearing. It could be very helpful. Like, hey, not in this, I hear my water bottle is empty. You want to walk with me to the water fountain and keep talking about this, to give some distance. So being aware of where you are as well can be really helpful with creating connection. Support reflection. So be curious about their experiences and ask why they reacted or felt a certain way. And I love the image to the right because it really it doesn't express it as much, but in all of the work that I've done and seen done on youth development, the ability to reflect creates more long-term learning and behavior change than any activity that you do with a youth. So in that particular set, it's like, I understand that you're frustrated. Why do you think that is? Is there something that you know bothers you? How can you take care of the situation? How can you take care of yourself during this difficult time? You know, we talk about self-care. It's like, do you know what you need and what can you reflect on it? Can you think about what you did or why you did it? And a lot of times it's like, I don't know. Okay, take a minute, think about it. We also don't, if we're having difficult or emotionally charged conversations with youth, recognize that you may be able to put, you know, A plus B and C and D and follow that trajectory and logic your way all the way to the end, but it's not going to be a process that a young person can do very quickly or has ever really thought about. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that when I don't eat breakfast, I'm really grouchy. I got in a fight with a friend, and then I went to my math test and flunked it. Oh, like, you know, it's like, okay, we can usually, as adults, have practiced and learned how we can go back and logic our way through things, and that's not really a process that's natural or comfortable to a lot of young people. So really reflecting on it and giving time for them to really truly think about their feelings, their actions, reactions to what's going on is also extremely important. And this one is probably my biggest and key takeaway. And if there's one thing that you remember from this training, I really hope it is this slide. It's that validate their knowledge, experience, and emotions. Similar to what the video said, we have this tendency just assume youth are dramatic. They don't know. And the reason I picked this image of cups is that a lot of times we are under the assumption that youth are an empty vessel, an empty cup, to be filled with knowledge, experience, that they don't know what's going on. And that's incorrect. Youth are the experts on their lives. They know what's going on with them better than we can assume. Because we are making assumptions. We aren't them. We are not living their life in this moment with these circumstances, with their stressors. And so a couple of saying or phrases that are really helpful is, it must be really hard, or no, it's like, I understand. It's like, you feel this way, and that is valid, because you can feel many things at the same time, and they're both true. It's like the happy cry. I'm happy and I'm sad and I'm upset and I'm frustrated, and all of these feelings, they're all true at the same moment. And a lot of youth are really working through a lot of difficult things, especially at AHC. The population that we work with is very vulnerable to a lot of outside stressors and shocks. So recognizing that their feelings are valid, especially saying things along like, you shouldn't feel that way, is so demoralizing, because it completely invalidates their experiences and their, however they feel. Even if you believe it's wrong, it is right because it is their experience. And so that is, oh no, second to last strategy, but that is probably the most important strategy. And then the last one is thinking about how we're all on different paths. And so adolescence is the time when we really start recognizing this and seeing this and how emotionally we can get into this trap. So for example, we all learned to walk about within a couple months, but about the same time. We all started school about the same age. We all started reading about the same age. All of our milestones with all of our friends are so very linear, all very similar. And then we start hitting puberty. It's a little bit different. Everyone's a little bit different, especially for girls. You may get your period very early. Your friend might get it very, very late. And these are things outside of our control. So a lot of our major milestones, like high school graduation, are still going to be the same. But the first time we fall in love, the first time we become independent, the first time we go through a lot of things, it's going to start looking very different. And so comparisons are very detrimental and very difficult. And then this is actually something my grandmother told me when I was a child. It's like, what's happening in Ariel's story doesn't affect Cinderella. So focus on your story. And so I always loved that, because for me, the way that I interpret that is, my life is going to follow its own path and it's going to be different. And the end result might be the same, Ariel, Cinderella, find Prince Charming, live happily ever after. But the route that you take to get there is going to be very different. So I think that's very important for avoiding comparisons. Like, because there's also a lot of emotions around it. It's like, all of my friends got their driver's license and I haven't, and you feel behind. And when you feel behind, you feel inadequate, and it's a stress and it's difficult. And so avoiding comparisons can be very helpful when talking with youth and creating a positive and enabling environment. So, okay, we're gonna script that. Okay, because of time, because I'm a little bit past 8. I was supposed to get here a couple minutes before, but we're only a couple minutes behind my schedule. So